Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Story number 1. For All Mankind, written by Captain Capslock. So there he was, at the very cusp of destiny, the very fringes of fate. No, he was not a destiny. He was destiny himself, a vessel of change, a god of life and master of death. Was he both destiny and the reaper? Were those two things the same on this day? Were those two concepts ever separate? For some time he paused. He let the thousands of thoughts flow out of him and simply drifted in the void. He was weightless. His vessel was weightless. Space was, at that moment, infinitely small. 10,000 years before mankind would mark their first steps to the moon, Peter Lynch floated effortlessly around the unfathomably big red giant star. He postulated the fact that he was currently the only human being in space. All mankind, the great empire of man, the Terran dominion, children of Earth, reduced to a bunch of insects crawling atop a spinning rock. Still, he knew that if he accelerated at the apex of the orbit for about 120 minutes, he would be on course to intercept Earth in about 8,000 years' time. Peter was always good with numbers, and alas, that is the reason he ended up here. Destiny. Death. To understand Peter's turmoil, we must first understand his past. To understand his past, we must look to the relative future. Mankind explored space into the early 2100s. Space was big, and mankind was in its infancy in terms of technology, so the task was long and daunting. By 2150, we had the ability to travel at 1/10 the speed of light, and we could explore no more. Outside the gravitational pull of our solar system, there was nothing but blackness for lifetimes upon lifetimes. Mankind began to realize that unless it found some way to transcend these distances, we would never be the explorers of the stars that we dreamed ourselves to be. We would be confined to this rock of ours until resources ran dry and ended our reign. In the early 2200s, we began to experiment aggressively with gravitation, or the God Force, as some of the more religiously oriented humans would call it. Turned out to be something of an anomaly. Gravity was found to, in fact, be composed of strings, unending straight lines that stretched far to eternity, or so we theorized. These gravitational strings were packed together tighter than the atoms in a neutron star, as dense as any human could imagine. They also held no weight to them, zero mass, but were affected by the mass of surrounding objects. It was also impossible, absolutely impossible, for these strings to be manipulated by any means other than increasing the mass in the system. But what's impossible for a human? We tried, and we've tried, and we've tried. And when all else failed, we decided to blow up Neptune, a reaction caused by the Sigma singularity, or simplicity's sake, think of it as an unstoppable planetary cancer in the form of a single unstable atom, would be condensed all nearby matter into a tiny ball, comparable, once again, to the density of a neutron star. To keep it simple, we wanted to create a reaction that would produce a ripple in gravity. We wanted to then ride this ripple to somewhere far, far away, in the hopes that we could be explorers again. Humanity failed, but boy, did we create a ripple. About 3 months after Neptune collapsed, we were the first contacted by the HFY. Looks like we were on the right track, but Neptune was far too small a target to get us to where we needed to go. What it did do was alert another intelligence of our presence, and by some stroke of luck, they were peaceful. Boy, were we lucky. The HFY shared their technology with us freely, but they would always make sure we never knew too much. We couldn't blame them. Humanity had the potential to be a violent species. It was smart to keep them at bay. They taught us that collapsing giant stars and subsequently creating black holes in conjunction with the right technology could create wormholes to another areas of space. Sustainable wormholes. Humanity and the SciFi worked together over the next millennia. By the 3000th year of mankind, we were as brothers. There was no longer a superior to us in technology. We considered each other to be equals. Well, almost equal. The SciFi had always started out ahead, and in their technological leadership, they carved a place in history as humanity's big brother. Always looking out for us, always taking care of us, as close to love as two intergalactic species could be. Our big brother protecting and guiding us. Mankind had never felt so safe in the arms of another. There was yet one frontier that we had not crossed together. Time. Near the end of the 3,500th human year, the SciFi and mankind put all their intellect and resources together into learning to control and manipulate time. The final frontier, the payload, Father, was built near Earth. It was a vessel that was the pinnacle of both civilizations, the size of an old Boeing 747 airplane. The vessel was tiny in comparison to the ships surrounding it, but the magic was all inside. The ship had the ability to condense itself into the event horizon of a black hole, to stretch itself into nothing more than gravitational waves. Through these waves, we could transcend time, then re-emerge at another point in time and space entirely. The stage was set. Peter, honored chairman of the Interspecies Alliance, was to be at the helm. They were in orbit around a supermassive black hole and had their eye on the prize. Exactly 10 minutes earlier, Peter was going to condense himself 10 minutes into the past, and in doing so, change history. And so into the event he went, and the ship condensed and reappeared thousands of years into the past. About 10,000 years before the lunar landings, to be exact. A malfunction. Sabotage negative. This vessel was working as intended. 10,000 years before humanity ventures into space, and 8,000 years before the SciFi venture into space. The SciFi, like our loving big brothers, our loving, ever-watchful big brothers. We look up to them. We love them because we have to. Our loving, watchful, controlling big brothers. How far would mankind have come without their help? We would still be the apes stuck in the prison cells of our Earth. Well, to be fair, mankind was already on its way. Neptune failed, but there was still Jupiter. And sure, it would take a while, but sooner or later we would have collapsed a star. Then we would have traveled the galaxy, exploring and collecting as we saw fit. We would have been big brothers. We would have been the ever-watchful and ever-loving guidance that the SciFi needed. They would love us and look up to us, as we were forced to do with them. We only wanted to love as they had loved us. We only wanted the freedoms that they were granted to them when they began exploring space. We just wanted to find our own way. We are humanity. Our story should not simply be the additional volume to the SciFi Galaxy records. So Peter soaked it all in. This lovely giant star, which would one day be the black hole that his future self would use to come back here and observe the beauty and quiet of this untouched universe. He pressed a few buttons and watched as his payload was ejected from the cargo hold of his wonderfully advanced ship. This Sigma singularity would take approximately 5 years to impact onto the surface of the SciFi homeworld. After that, our destiny would be in our own hands. Freedom. Freedom from oppressive love. This is all we ever wanted. Peter then fired up his engines, sure that he would be long dead by the time the craft reached Earth, but the technology contained on board would put us light years ahead of where we should have been. For all mankind, he whispered to himself. End of story. Story number 2. Speak Softly, written by the Caleb Mack. In the event of first contact, 3 distinct points must be observed by one or both parties. Firstly, take nothing for granted. Life always finds a way, and given the vast number of worlds able to support and sustain life, it is almost countless forms, it is mathematically certainly that once a reasonable level of complexity is achieved, sentience is simply a matter of time. As to what, for all that would take, historically speaking, there is at least a galactic average. Universally speaking, the sample size to date is too small for anything but educated conjecture. Secondly, just with the first point, this existence of cultural differences are to be assumed until proven or disproven via interactions between two parties. For all the same reasons as above, maintain a level head and don't take yourself too seriously, so as to avoid offending one another. Thirdly, and arguably most important of all, be slow and kind when you communicate, but always have your weapons handy, just in case. Did a human write this? Indeed. Why am I not surprised? Because we have lived with humans for a century now, and it seems likely that they have finally exhausted every possible trick of their scary Deathworld brains can come up with. Hey guys, guess what we just figured out? How to make us or something else go even faster? Okay. Who told you? End of the story. The algorithm reckons you should be watching this video next, and I recommend that you should be always watching my video. So, click with energy! And yes, clicking that does help the channel. Thank you very much. I just quickly want to thank the Tier 5 patrons and channel members: Alithia Barkey, Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Albarden Guster, Arcadian, Lord Azrakal, and Joachim Backer.